Opioid Detox Step-by-Step. Quit opioids, get healthy, and reclaim your freedom. By Matt Finch, narrated by the author. This is a rough recording and a rough draft I'm publishing for free on YouTube, so please, critics, be nice on me. Table of Contents. Introduction. Chapter 1, How Did We Get Here? Chapter 2, Opioids Are Not Bad, Only a Relationship to Them Is. Chapter 3, The Phases of Opioid Dependence. Chapter 4, Opioids, the Ultimate Resource for Certain Individuals. Chapter 5, Opioid Addiction, an Exhausted Resource. Chapter 6, The Dark Ages of Addiction Treatment. Chapter 7, The Hierarchy of Opioid Recovery. Chapter 8, Knowing is Half the Battle. Chapter 9, Getting Your Mind Right. Chapter 10, Choosing the Opioid Detox Protocol for Your Situation. Chapter 11, Designing Your Customized Holistic Treatment Plan. Chapter 12, The Ultimate Opioid Relapse Prevention Strategy. And conclusion, Are You Ready to Transform? Introduction. I was tied down on a stretcher while being rushed through a narrow hallway to what I imagined would lead to an operating room. I couldn't see well, but I knew exactly where I was. I had been abducted by aliens. Part of me was exhilarated because this had been a long-time fantasy of mine. Another part of me was fearful because I didn't know if the large-headed gray aliens had good or bad intentions for me. But overall, I didn't care too much because my life back on Earth was nothing but a waste of potential. I'll never forget that feeling. A moment later, I had a flash of an EMT screaming a question to me, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. The look of complete fear on his face is another memory I'll never forget. The next flash in my memory was vomiting, then darkness. From there, I had a longer flash of memory where I was in what seemed to be in some sort of crazy dream. It was so confusing. One minute I had a breathing tube down my throat, and the next minute it was out, and I couldn't breathe on my own. I felt the presence of other benevolent beings in the dimly lit room with me, but I couldn't see anything. The fear from not being able to breathe was intense, and then in a flash I saw humans a few feet in front of me cheering me on. By what seemed to be a miracle, I caught my breath and began breathing steadily, thus ending the choking and feeling like I was going to die. Smiles and clapping ensued from the benevolent humans in the weird, dreamlike setting with me. The last thing I remember from that scene is giving a thumbs up to my supportive humans that were celebrating my win at breathing on my own after the breathing tube was removed from my lungs. Then, more darkness. Next, I was coming to consciousness in a small, brightly lit room. I was sitting up in a little hospital bed with a white blanket on, and I was wearing a hospital wristband. My parents were both sitting close to me. They were looking directly at me and smiling. I could feel their love and warmth. "You overdosed, Matthew. They barely saved your life. You're so lucky to be alive," they said. I'm still not too sure what the whole alien thing was about, but it probably wasn't real. Reliving the overdose memory, however, is surreal. I feel a mixture of excitement, relief, gratitude, and love. I probably wasn't abducted by aliens, but when I was unconscious, overdosed on methadone and Valium, while the EMTs had me on the stretcher, that's what I saw and felt. My mom had a premonition that someone in the family was going to die 2 days before the overdose. After the overdose, my mom heard a voice in her head say, "Go check on Matthew." She went downstairs and found me lying on my back with a gray face, blue lips, and vomit trickling out of my mouth. At the hospital, my doctor said that if the EMT didn't give me a dose of Narcan when he did, within 1 to 2 minutes later I would have been dead. Thus, my mom's psychic premonition and audible voice in her head, then fast action combined with the quick response of the EMTs, literally saved my life. The scene of me choking to catch my breath after having a breathing tube removed from my throat also really happened. It was part of my 7-day treatment at the hospital. While passed out unconscious from the lethal mixture of high-dose methadone and high-dose Valium, I vomited, and since I was lying on my back and unconscious, most of the vomit went back down my throat. This caused an infection. At the hospital, I had a serious lung infection, pneumonia, and they put me in a medically induced coma. And I had many other health issues going on as well. And to make a long story short, I'm lucky to be alive. And further still, I haven't wasted my second chance at life. After realizing that I nearly left my daughter Willow, who was only 18 months old at the time, without a father for the rest of her life, I felt so much shame and guilt that it was finally enough to kick me into high gear on a new path. I realized that I had been on the service to self path, and most of everything I did in the first 32 years of my life was self-centered, selfish, and for personal gain. I rarely thought about serving others and was mostly concerned with myself. This was probably the first time I had a sense of total clarity and self-honesty, and I didn't like what I saw. Thus, I made a decision and commitment from that point forward to do things differently with my new chance at life. After all, I had a beautiful little daughter that needed a strong, confident, healthy, and grounded father to raise her. Thus, like J.K. Rowling stated during her famous commencement speech for Harvard, rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. At this point, you may be wondering how I got myself into this big mess. A valid question. It all comes down to not feeling comfortable in my own skin, not feeling part of the mainstream culture of materialism and survival of the fittest, and I was always a sensitive kid, teenager, and adult. Many years after ending my addiction, I found out that I'm a highly sensitive person and an empath. Most people don't have either of these traits, let alone both of them together. I also experienced childhood trauma, teenage trauma, and adult trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. In between the dozens of moderate to huge traumas, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of micro-traumas. It was a life existence that mostly went by the tune of a whole lot of trauma, sensitivity, not fitting in, not feeling okay, and doing whatever I could to ease my mental, emotional, and spiritual pains regardless of their short-term and long-term negative consequences. After years of using cannabis from the ages of 15 to 22, I developed a love of alcohol, and after that, benzos and opioids. Specifically, the alcohol, benzos, and opioids were my favorite substances because as CNS depressants, they worked the best for my sensitiveness. They also helped me to feel a sense of confidence that I had never felt sober. For most of my 20s, I was a complete wreck, although there were multiple periods of weeks or months of either total sobriety or moderate use, but for the most part, I was deeply hooked on drugs and alcohol and seriously attached to the drug and drinking culture and social group I had. At the age of 27, I moved from San Diego, California, to Norwich, New York, to play in a reggae rock band, and also to get away from the social circle that was not healthy for me. Within a few hours getting off the plane in upstate New York, I was already bar hopping and meeting dozens of new bad influences that were into drugs, alcohol, and partying. Oh well. Not long after living in New York, I had a girlfriend and got her pregnant, and things went south 2 months into the pregnancy and we broke up. She got with a new boyfriend quickly after the breakup, and I was going through so much mental and emotional anguish that I began using opioids at every chance I could find people selling them. For many years in my 20s, I had used pills and a few times even heroin, but never became addicted. A combination of not knowing dealers that had pills consistently and being pretty broke most of the time probably saved me from opioid addiction during the earlier days. Although throughout that phase of life, I was often heavily addicted to alcohol or Valium, and even went through phases of methamphetamine use, smoking crack, snorting cocaine, using mescaline, MDMA, and many other drugs and combinations of drugs and drugs with alcohol. However, now that I was living in a very small town in upstate New York that had a big opioid problem, and I had a steady job as a cook and knew several people that sold pills, I had a constant supply, and at least for the first 2 months of using them daily, enough money to use RX opioids every single day throughout the day. At the end of 2 months, I ran out of pills and couldn't find any more. I went through my first opioid withdrawal, and during the first day, I thought I was just having a massive panic attack, so I drank a 12-pack of beer to get through that day. Day 2 of withdrawal, I woke up feeling at least 3 times as bad, and fortunately, one of my dealers texted me and said that I was going through withdrawal, and while that didn't help my symptoms any, at least I knew it was wrong with me. After 1 week off of pills, I was feeling okay and had no post-acute withdrawal symptoms since I had only used opioids for 2 months, and I was pretty healthy and young overall. Most rational people with common sense would never so much as look at an opioid again after my several days of acute opioid withdrawal that had me scared for my life, glued to the couch, in constant panic and stomach pain, insomnia, diarrhea, hot and cold flashes, vomiting, goose flesh, temperature issues, and other awful mental and emotional and physical symptoms. Yet, literally 1 week later, I was purchasing a few 40 milligram OCs, which were the old Oxycontin tablets that one could scrape, crush up, and snort for an instant and powerful high by disengaging the time-release system that the OCs had by default. Over the next few years, I had one time where I was off opioids for 4 months, but for the entire rest of that period, I was totally addicted to high-dose RX opioids. Prescription opioid addiction was like heroin addiction training wheels. I had phases on black market Suboxone, which helped me to stay off pills, but it gave me horrible side effects, and it made my facial skin so bad that I was embarrassed and felt insecure as my face was red and dry and flaky, and I had hot flashes like a woman going through severe menopause, no libido, and I had cystic acne all over my back, so I was too embarrassed to even take my shirt off. It also gave me a real chemical, jittered out feeling and other side effects as well. The fear of withdrawal and the fear of living life clean and sober kept me on the rat wheel going round and round for many years. And then, as stated previously, I overdosed and narrowly escaped death. For the only 4 months I was off opioids, I was exhausted, depressed, and anxious and couldn't feel happiness or joy or any sort of pleasure. And thus I said screw it and started using opioids again. One thing I learned is that opioids can hook you fast. And once you're hooked and have responsibilities like work and kids, getting unhooked, at least for me, was nowhere near as fast as the process of getting hooked. The opioids started off being an awesome resource for my emotional and mental anguish, and they gave me tons of energy to work and raise my newborn baby as a single dad. For me, they were a subjectively awesome asset at the beginning until soon they became my demise. It all happened so fast, too. I didn't realize that although they were prescription medicines, it was basically heroin in tablet form that I was using. When I finally ended my addiction, I made it my life's purpose and mission to help others do the same. At the end of 2012, I had finished school and was working as a full-time certified drug and alcohol counselor at an outpatient opioid treatment program, OTP. However, after a few years of working in the field of mainstream drug and alcohol treatment, I realized just how futile my efforts were. The success rates were almost zero, and I grew burned out and totally disheartened as the pay was lousy, the stress was very high, and my life's mission of helping others free themselves from opioids for good was not going well at all. Thus, I left my secure career and paycheck and health benefits to start my first website in the spring of 2014, which I named Opiate Addiction Support. It was a big risk, and my friends and family thought I was crazy for leaving my career that I had went to school for to follow some pipe dream. Nobody believed in me, but I believed in myself and had a strong inner knowing that through blogging and writing articles on opioid detox and recovery solutions, I'd eventually start gaining website traffic and thus making a difference and fulfilling my mission in life. The rest is history. It has now been around 8 years since I started my first website, and since then I've written more than 350 articles and created hundreds of videos and several online courses on opioid addiction, detoxification, and recovery. In this book, you're going to learn my proven system that millions have learned about and countless people have used to end their opioid addictions and transform their lives. You're going to learn why opioid addiction is no longer a viable option, as it's what I call an exhausted resource, which is an extraordinary concept about addiction that comes from neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. With this book, you'll enhance your mindset more than ever before and supercharge your chances of quitting on the very next attempt you make. You'll also learn about all of the best opioid detoxification protocols and how to choose the best one for your highly unique situation, resources, preferences, desires, needs, and more. You're going to learn many things you can do to radically increase your chances of quitting on the very next attempt you make, far beyond things like opioid detox protocols, withdrawal remedies, and supplements, including but not limited to optimized accountability, support systems, resourcefulness, mental models and frameworks, and much, much more. Perhaps one of the most powerful resources you'll learn about is how to create your own customized hierarchy of opioid recovery holistic treatment plan, and how to find and fill in your own personal missing links to your personal opioid recovery puzzle. Further still, you're going to learn what you can do to feel much, much better and more comfortable during the entire process of opioid detoxification withdrawal, and how you can make the post-acute withdrawal phase shorter in duration and lower in the severity of the symptoms too. Finally, you're going to learn how to prevent opioid relapse for life and how to feel energized, confident, balanced, happy, and whole without the opioid crutch. I'm going to coach you through this process every step of the way, and you'll soon find out, if you haven't already, that I'm a pretty good fit for the job. Along with personal experience being addicted to opioids and successfully ending my addiction 10 years ago, and my years counseling at an opioid treatment program as a certified chemical dependency counselor, I've also helped more than 500 personal opioid recovery coaching clients. My website has helped more than 3 million visitors. The videos I've created have been seen by millions of people. 250,000 people have benefited from listening to the Elevation Recovery podcast, which I co-host with Chris Scott of Fit Recovery, and I've also helped friends quit opioids too. Helping people with opioid addiction is my passion, and I wrote this book in a fashion to be the book I wish I had when I was addicted. I wanted to write a book on opioid addiction recovery 6 years ago, but I'm so glad that I held off until now, because it's by my estimation at least 20 times better now than it would have been then, which means it will be so much more helpful for you. This is a guidebook for any person that wants to quit opioids, is highly motivated to do so, wants more out of life, and has likely tried quitting opioids many times, and is also open to a new way of viewing opioid addiction that doesn't follow the mainstream dogmas and approaches. It's a step-by-step manual and customizable blueprint that will help any person quit any opioid or combination of opioids using a plan that is tailor-made for them and their unique situation. This book is not a resource on how to choose a traditional recovery method like 12-step meetings or long-term or lifelong medication-assisted treatment, even though I know those are good options for many people. There is already plenty of quality information out there on the mainstream methods, and for people that want those, there is no shortage of books, podcasts, videos, and more on these concepts. The main lessons in Opioid Detox Step-by-Step are that it's a choose-your-own-adventure and customize-your-own transformation plan book where you get to learn the best options out there, learn the concepts I teach that are non-traditional, alternative, integrative, and complementary, and decide which resources and systems and elements you choose or create based on what you learn. This is not a one-size-fits-all recovery book. It's a map of the terrain and the many viable and high-efficiency roads that will get you to the destination you are seeking. There is no one path only to recovery, despite popular belief and dogma. Additionally, this book is not going to shove total abstinence and sobriety of all mood-altering substances for life down your throat like mainstream treatments do. If you want to quit opioids but not swear off alcohol or other things forever too, then you're in the right place. And if you want to quit opioids and stay totally sober from everything else as well forever, this book will help you achieve that goal just as well. Finally, this book is for open-minded people that will put in the consistent and diligent effort and patience to achieve the challenging goal of quitting opioids. Opioid Detox Step-by-Step is a guidebook for any person that wants to quit opioids, is highly motivated to do so, wants more out of life, and has likely tried quitting many times. This book is a step-by-step blueprint that will help any person quit any opioid or opioids using a plan that is tailor-made for them personally. So, are you ready to start the first step of your journey of getting off opioids once and for all? If so, keep listening.